Picture this. You walk into a room and the conversation stops, not because you're important, but because you've become invisible. Your ideas are dismissed, your presence overlooked, your voice somehow lost in the noise of life. You've experienced this, haven't you? That crushing weight of being ignored, dismissed, treated as if you don't matter. It's one of the most painful human experiences, cutting deeper than outright hostility, because at least anger acknowledges your existence. But what if I told you that some of history's greatest minds faced this exact same struggle, and not only survived it, but transformed it into their greatest source of power? What if the very act of being ignored could become your pathway to unshakable inner strength? Today, we're going to journey back over 2,000 years to ancient Rome and Greece, where emperors and slaves alike discovered a revolutionary approach to human suffering. We're going to explore how Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, dealt with betrayal and isolation. We'll witness how Epictetus, born into slavery and physically disabled, turned his powerlessness into philosophical mastery. We'll learn from Seneca, who navigated the treacherous waters of Roman politics while maintaining his dignity and wisdom. These weren't just philosophers writing pretty words in ivory towers. These were real people facing real rejection, real dismissal, real human cruelty. And they developed a system of thinking that can transform your relationship with being ignored forever. The ancient Stoics understood something profound about human nature that we've forgotten in our modern world obsessed with external validation. They realized that when people ignore you, they're actually giving you the greatest gift possible, complete freedom to define yourself. But this gift comes wrapped in pain, and most people never unwrap it. They remain trapped in the cycle of seeking approval, desperately trying to force others to notice them, to validate their worth, to acknowledge their existence. This is where your transformation begins, right here, right now, by understanding that being ignored isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. Let me take you back to ancient Rome in the year 161 CE. Marcus Aurelius has just become emperor, inheriting not just unprecedented power, but also unprecedented problems. The empire is crumbling from within. Barbarian tribes are attacking the borders, plague is devastating the population, and even his closest advisors are plotting against him. But perhaps most painfully, his own son Commodus shows nothing but contempt for everything Marcus stands for. Imagine the most powerful man on earth, writing alone in his tent during military campaigns, pouring his heart out to his journal because there's literally no one he can trust with his deepest thoughts. His writings, which we now know as meditations, weren't meant for publication. They were the private thoughts of a man who was profoundly alone at the top, ignored by those he loved most, dismissed by those he served faithfully. Yet in this isolation, Marcus discovered something revolutionary. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wasn't philosophical theory for him, this was survival. When everyone around him was either trying to use him or actively working against him, when his own family ignored his wisdom and his people took his sacrifices for granted, Marcus learned to find his validation from within. He understood that seeking approval from others was like trying to control the weather. You can dance all you want, but the rain will come when it comes, and the sun will shine when it chooses to shine. This brings us to the first powerful principle that can transform your relationship with being ignored: the dichotomy of control. The Stoics divided everything in life into two categories: things you can control and things you cannot control. Other people's opinions, attention, and validation fall squarely into the second category. You cannot control whether someone chooses to acknowledge you, listen to your ideas, or treat you with respect. But you have absolute control over how you respond to their choice to ignore you. Think about the last time someone important to you completely dismissed something you cared about. Maybe it was your boss ignoring your innovative idea in a meeting, or a friend who never seems to have time for your concerns, or a family member who treats your achievements as if they're invisible. Your natural response was probably to try harder, to speak louder, to find new ways to force their attention. But the Stoics would tell you this is exactly backwards. The more you chase external validation, the more power you give others over your inner peace. Seneca, who served as advisor to Emperor Nero, knew this principle intimately. Here was a man trying to guide one of history's most unstable rulers, often finding his wisdom ignored or twisted for political gain. Seneca could have spent his energy becoming bitter about Nero's refusal to listen, or he could have compromised his principles to gain the emperor's favor. Instead, he focused on what he could control: his own character, his own responses, his own commitment to wisdom. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Each time Nero ignored his counsel, Seneca saw it as an opportunity to strengthen his own philosophical practice. But here's where most people get stuck. They understand intellectually that they can't control others, but emotionally they're still devastated when ignored. This is because they're missing the second crucial principle, the discipline of desire. The Stoics taught that suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from the gap between what we desire and what we receive. When you desperately desire someone's attention, approval, or acknowledgement, you set yourself up for suffering every time they choose to ignore you. Epictetus, who understood powerlessness better than perhaps any philosopher in history, put it this way: "Wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants." The same principle applies to social validation. Your emotional wealth consists not in having everyone's attention and approval, but in wanting less of it. This doesn't mean becoming a hermit or not caring about relationships. It means finding your center in something more reliable than other people's fickle attention. Let me paint you a picture of Epictetus's early life. Born into slavery, physically disabled, he had no control over his circumstances, no power in the traditional sense, no reason to expect anyone to pay attention to his ideas. His master could ignore him, beat him, or sell him at will. Yet in this apparent powerlessness, Epictetus discovered true freedom. He realized that while his body could be enslaved, his mind remained free. While others could ignore his words, they couldn't touch his inner dialogue. While they could dismiss his presence, they couldn't diminish his character. This leads us to one of the most transformative insights in all of Stoic philosophy. When people ignore you, they're actually revealing more about themselves than about you. Marcus Aurelius observed that people's behavior toward others is usually a reflection of their own inner state. The colleague who consistently dismisses your ideas might be struggling with their own insecurity. The friend who never seems to have time for your concerns might be overwhelmed by their own problems. The family member who treats your achievements as invisible might be dealing with their own sense of failure. Understanding this doesn't excuse their behavior, but it frees you from taking it personally. When someone ignores you, you have a choice. You can interpret it as evidence of your unworthiness, or you can see it as information about their current capacity for attention and connection. The Stoics would choose the latter every time because it keeps the power in your hands. Now, let's explore how this philosophical understanding translates into practical power. When you stop desperately seeking others' attention, something magical happens. You become more attractive, not less. Think about the people in your life who command genuine respect. Are they the ones constantly seeking validation, or are they the ones who seem comfortable in their own skin regardless of who's paying attention? There's a gravitational pull to people who don't need your approval, who are interesting and engaged whether you're listening or not. Seneca demonstrated this principle beautifully in his relationship with Nero. The more Seneca focused on his own philosophical development rather than seeking the emperor's approval, the more valuable he became as an advisor. Even when Nero ignored his counsel, Seneca's reputation grew among other Romans who recognized his wisdom and character. By not chasing Nero's validation, Seneca attracted the respect of history itself. This brings us to another crucial Stoic principle, the view from above. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced an exercise where he would imagine viewing his problems from a cosmic perspective. Picture yourself 10 years from now, looking back at the current situation where someone is ignoring you. How important will it seem then? How much of your mental energy will you wish you had spent on it? The emperor, who commanded legions and ruled millions regularly, reminded himself that in the grand scope of history, even his reign was just a brief moment. This isn't about minimizing your feelings or pretending that being ignored doesn't hurt. It's about putting that pain in perspective so it doesn't control your decisions. When you can zoom out and see the bigger picture, you realize that other people's attention is far less important than your own character development. You start to understand that every moment you spend desperately seeking validation is a moment stolen from building something genuinely valuable, your own wisdom, strength, and inner peace. But the Stoics weren't content just to endure being ignored. They found ways to transform it into advantage. This is the principle of the obstacle as the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." When someone ignores you, they're actually creating space for you to develop independence, creativity, and self-reliance. They're forcing you to find validation from within, which is the only validation that can never be taken away from you. Consider how this played out in Epictetus's life. His physical disability and social status meant that many people dismissed him before he even spoke. But this forced him to develop such compelling wisdom and teaching ability that his ideas eventually reached far more people than if he had been born into privilege. The very obstacles that seemed to diminish his voice actually amplified it across centuries. You can apply this same principle to your own life. When your boss ignores your ideas, instead of becoming resentful, use it as motivation to develop those ideas more fully, to present them more compellingly, or to find alternative venues where they'll be appreciated. When friends consistently overlook your contributions to conversations, instead of talking louder, become more interesting by developing deeper knowledge and more unique perspectives. When family members dismiss your achievements, instead of seeking their validation, let their indifference fuel your commitment to excellence for its own sake. This transformation requires what the Stoics called prosos, or continuous attention to the present moment. Most of our suffering about being ignored happens not in the actual moment of being ignored, but in our mental replay of past slights or our anxious anticipation of future rejections. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to stay present, to deal with what was actually happening, rather than the stories his mind created around what was happening. The next time someone ignores you, practice this stoic attention. Instead of immediately spinning a narrative about what their behavior means about you, simply observe what's actually occurring. They chose not to respond to your email. They walked past you without acknowledgement. They changed the subject when you started talking. These are just facts, neutral events in themselves. The suffering comes from the meaning you add to these facts. Seneca mastered this practice during his years in Nero's court, where political survival often depended on reading between the lines of every interaction. He learned to distinguish between what people actually did and what he imagined their actions meant. This skill not only kept him alive in a dangerous environment, but also preserved his mental peace in the face of constant uncertainty about others' intentions. The Stoics also understood that being ignored often reveals our attachments to things that aren't truly important. When you're devastated by someone's lack of attention, ask yourself what you're really attached to. Is it their specific validation? Or is it the idea of being universally liked? Is it their approval of this particular idea? Or is it your identity as someone whose ideas are always appreciated? Often, being ignored is an invitation to examine whether you've tied your self-worth to things outside your control. Marcus Aurelius faced this challenge when dealing with his son Commodus, who showed no interest in philosophy or virtue and eventually became one of Rome's most notorious emperors. Imagine the pain of a father whose deepest values are completely ignored by his own child. But Marcus learned to separate his love for Commodus from his attachment to Commodus becoming a particular type of person. He continued to offer guidance while accepting that his son might choose a different path entirely. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to relationships or not caring whether people respond to you. The Stoics valued friendship and community deeply, but they distinguished between preference and attachment. You can prefer that people listen to you, acknowledge you, and treat you with respect, while not being attached to these outcomes in a way that destroys your peace when they don't occur. Here's where the rubber meets the road in your daily life. The next time you feel ignored, instead of immediately reacting with hurt or anger, pause and ask yourself what this situation is teaching you. Is it showing you that you've been too dependent on others' validation? Is it revealing that you need to develop more confidence in your own judgment? Is it highlighting areas where you could grow stronger or more self-reliant? Epictetus taught his students to treat every challenge as a training exercise sent by the gods to strengthen their character. From this perspective, being ignored isn't a punishment or a sign of your inadequacy. It's a workout for your philosophical muscles, an opportunity to practice finding your worth from within, rather than from external sources. The Stoics also recognized that how you respond to being ignored sends a message about your character. When someone dismisses you and you respond with desperation, anger, or attempts to force their attention, you confirm their assessment that you're not worth listening to. But when you respond with dignity, continued excellence, and unshakable self-possession, you challenge their dismissal and often earn their respect, even if they don't admit it. Seneca demonstrated this principle repeatedly in his political career. When his advice was ignored or his position threatened, he didn't lash out or compromise his principles to regain favor. He continued to act with integrity and wisdom, knowing that his reputation would ultimately be built on his character rather than on any single person's opinion of him. This approach not only preserved his dignity, but often led to his eventual vindication when events proved his wisdom correct. Think about someone in your life whose respect you genuinely value, someone you consider wise and admirable. How do they handle being ignored or dismissed? Chances are they don't chase after others' attention or become bitter when it's withheld. They remain focused on their own path, their own values, their own contribution to the world. This is the kind of person you become when you internalize Stoic principles about dealing with being ignored. The transformation isn't just personal, it's also practical. When you stop being desperate for others' attention, you make better decisions. You choose relationships based on mutual respect rather than on who validates you. You pursue goals that align with your values rather than goals designed to impress others. You develop skills and knowledge for their intrinsic value rather than just for recognition. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about the futility of seeking fame or lasting recognition. He observed that even the greatest emperors and heroes were eventually forgotten, their names becoming mere historical footnotes. But he also noted that this didn't make their actions meaningless. The value of doing good, pursuing wisdom, and treating others with justice doesn't depend on whether anyone notices or remembers. This perspective is incredibly liberating when applied to everyday situations. Your worth doesn't depend on whether your boss acknowledges your hard work, whether your friends appreciate your loyalty, or whether your family recognizes your sacrifices. These things are nice when they happen, but they're not necessary for you to live a meaningful and valuable life. As we near the end of this journey through Stoic wisdom, let's return to where we started. That moment when you walk into a room and feel invisible. Armed with these ancient insights, you can now see this experience completely differently. Instead of evidence of your inadequacy, it becomes an opportunity to practice self-reliance. Instead of a reason for despair, it becomes a chance to strengthen your character. Instead of a problem to solve by gaining others' attention, it becomes a gift that frees you to focus on what truly matters. The path forward isn't about becoming cold or indifferent to others. It's about finding your center in something more reliable than their fluctuating attention. It's about building your sense of worth on the foundation of your own character, choices, and commitment to virtue. It's about recognizing that the most powerful response to being ignored is to become so genuinely interesting, so authentically valuable, so unshakably centered that others' attention becomes irrelevant to your sense of self. Marcus Aurelius, writing alone in his tent while governing an empire, Seneca navigating the treacherous waters of Roman politics, and Epictetus transforming slavery into philosophical freedom all discovered the same truth. Your power doesn't come from others' recognition of you. It comes from your recognition of yourself. When you truly understand this, when you internalize it so deeply that it becomes part of your automatic response to life's challenges, you join the ranks of history's most resilient and admirable people. The next time someone ignores you, remember that you're in good company. Some of humanity's greatest minds faced the same challenge and used it to forge unshakable inner strength. You have access to the same tools they used, the same principles they practiced, the same transformation they achieved. The question isn't whether you'll be ignored again, because you will. The question is whether you'll use that experience to become stronger, wiser, and more genuinely powerful than you were before. Your journey toward true inner strength starts now, in this moment, with this choice. Will you continue to give others the power to determine your worth through their attention or lack thereof? Or will you reclaim that power and build your sense of self on the only foundation that can never be shaken? The Stoics knew the answer, and now you do too. The path is clear, the tools are available, and the transformation awaits. What will you choose?